The first World Conference took place in Athens in 2009, and the second World Conference took place in Barcelona in 2012. This is the third World Conference in Warsaw, and we're very happy to be here.
Przybywa 130 scenarzystów z całego świata. I rzeczywiście to nie jest przesada, mówiąc z całego świata, dlatego że mamy gości zarówno ze Stanów Zjednoczonych, których Państwo tu zresztą widzą, z prawie całej Europy, jak również z Indii, z Afryki, z Kenii, z bardzo, bardzo wielu krajów, z Izraela dość liczna delegacja przybyła, z tych krajów, które rzeczywiście jakąś istotną rolę odgrywają na mapie kina światowego i przemysłu audiowizualnego. Może nieco mniej jest gości z Azji, ale to jest też jakby wynik tego, że prawda, India, no, to też jest częścią, jest to oczywiście kontynent azjatycki, ale mówię o Azji Południowo-Wschodniej. Tutaj mamy mniej kontaktów. Mam nadzieję, że to się będzie rozszerzało.
Conference has many different subjects. We try and cover issues that are relevant to screenwriters. So that's people working for film and television, and to some extent also people doing work on the internet. So we have themes. We're looking at the Polish industry, and we're looking at the model of funding films in Poland, which I'm sure Mr. Kapinski can talk more about. We're also talking about the Scandinavian production model, which we feel is very beneficial for screenwriters in allowing them to develop their stories. We're also looking at developments in screenwriting with what we call writers in the room, and that's a situation where a lead writer will be in charge of a team of writers to develop stories in the sort of series that are very popular now in Europe and in America.
To będzie również dla nas, czyli właśnie polskich scenarzystów, ogromnie ważne spotkanie i bardzo ważna lekcja. Niektóre spośród problemów, które tu panowie już zdążyli poruszyć i które będą szeroko omawiane, są także naszymi problemami. I to zarówno w tym aspekcie kreatywnym, jak i w aspekcie prawnym, dotyczącym praw autorskich i tak dalej.
Będziemy mogli się też pochwalić tym, że polskie prawo tworzy pewne mechanizmy szacunku dla pracy scenarzysty. Nie tylko polskie, europejskie prawo autorskie tworzy, znaczy uniemożliwia w jakiejś mierze uczynienia ze scenarzysty montażysty na linii fordowskiej, tak bym to powiedział.
We've come here both to listen and to learn, to bring our experience and to hear from others' experience. We're living in a moment, and I think the conference is hitting on it, where television has become an enormously powerful medium in the world. A couple of things have caused that. The first is the ability to share what we make with everyone. The internet in particular has allowed us to transmit our work product without almost any barriers. And when I say we, I mean all the television production that goes on in the world. And the second is that the format the television have developed has meant that it's an era of unprecedented power for writers who work in that medium. And we're here to talk about why that's the case, and how to encourage that in those other film industries where that has not yet happened. Because the potential for writers to be the singular voice in a format which has not been true up till now has its moment in the world, and we're here to capture that moment as best we can.
I'd like to add that in an era of unprecedented global concentration of media ownership, the problems of people who work in the media are the ability to face global conglomerates with a global response from the writers who are first creators. We exchange information about our employers, about our work situations, and we exchange information about the creative problems that we face, both amongst ourselves as writers who are responsible for creating media, and as writers who are workers who have to serve the media with commercially acceptable product. In fact, not even commercially acceptable, but hugely successful product, because this is, as Chris pointed out, an age where television has no boundaries.
The things that we look at in the Scandinavian model are funding, so that the screenwriters are allowed to develop their stories to a very great extent, compared to a model where there is a lot of pressure to just get the story out and to produce things very quickly. So the Scandinavians give their stories time to mature, and they give the writers the time and the resources and the money to develop those stories. And then they allow time in production for the writers to take a lead in the production. So the writers are not just cast aside once the script is delivered. They take a part in the vision of the series, and so I think they're the main things that are important. And the executives who run the business are interested, but they are not creators. And in Scandinavia, their success is partly due to the fact that the people realize that creators are best when they are allowed to have the time to create themselves.
When I worked on the movie about the big fish, it was a golden era for Hollywood films. The 70s and the early 80s produced some wonderful films that had global audiences. The U.S. never had, in its history of popular media, anything like a Ministry of Culture, a Ministry of Film, a state-supported film industry. We were kind of a model of pure laissez-faire capitalism. As a result, we developed the most efficient system for appealing to popular taste. It was succeed on a global level or fail, with no fallback support. The creators had to work for studios, and studios had to make movies. Movies had to play in theaters and constantly be replaced by new movies. Sadly, we are now in an era where the purely commercial model has caused a, how shall I say, a detrimental concentration on a very narrow genre of popular film that requires huge budgets and stories and themes that are familiar, that is, remakes, sequels, reboots, adaptations of other media that have already proved their popularity. And as a result, the individual film creator who used to be able to find a mid-range niche is now forced to either write small independent features whose budgets are limited, or pictures that are made for hundreds of millions of dollars that have to gross $500 million worldwide in order to be successful. And as a result, what used to be an income stream that was half domestic and half foreign within the U.S. industry has degenerated to where it's 25 or 30% domestic and 70 or 80% foreign, which means if the big fish came out today, it would be swallowing, the planet, rather than just the movie industry of its time, which was 40 years ago.
W lutym byłem na festiwalu w Santa Barbara i tam organizatorzy zorganizowali tak, no, fantastyczne, bardzo ciekawe spotkanie z 5 scenarzystami 5 nominowanych do Oscara filmów. I każdy z nich opowiadał, w jaki sposób doszło do produkcji filmu, który następnie został nominowany do Oscara. To była bardzo, bardzo ciężka, cierniowa droga. Żaden z ich scenariuszy nie był zaakceptowany przez jakiekolwiek studio albo przez producenta. Każdy z nich przeszedł taką drogę, że musiał znaleźć albo aktora, w wypadku Matthew McConaughey i filmu Dallas Buyers Club, że po prostu przyszedł do niego na lunch i dał mu ten skrypt. I to było już po 10 lat próbował ten skrypt gdzieś umieścić i wreszcie ten Matthew McConaughey przeczytał, zechciał w tym zagrać i powiedział mu spokojnie, zrobimy ten film. Scenarzysta filmu Nebraska z kolei też znalazł reżysera Aleksandra Payne'a, któremu swój scenariusz zaprobował. Także wszystko się zmieniło. Jeżeli ktoś teraz napisze jakiś ambitny scenariusz, który jakby się ze standardów przemysłu filmowego wyłamuje, ma bardzo ciężką drogę, żeby dotrzeć do produkcji.
The third question was what changes have resulted from the fact that television is either written for or distributed over the internet. That is the central question that we have dealt with at the Writers Guild of America West, and I think our brethren in the East would say the same, certainly in the United States, for some time. For years, it wasn't clear what the answer was going to be, and it was both exciting and a little scary. Exciting because writing for the internet meant that the barriers to entry to be creative were much lower than they used to be. It meant that people whose voice had never been heard on television were now being heard in this new format. At the same time, it wasn't clear whether it was going to be possible to be a professional writer on the internet, whether we could monetize our work. If writing for the internet meant writing drama or comedy in 10-minute blocks, it might be difficult to do that. And in the early years, when I say the early years, I mean a year or two ago, we just didn't know what the answer was going to be. But it turns out the answer is a very good one, or it seems up till now to be a very good one. On the one hand, those voices are still being heard now in a way they weren't heard before. People are still producing smaller pieces of work that then become an entry-level product that gets them into the market. But the market, by and large, for drama and comedy on the internet has turned out to more or less mirror the format of the market on television. In other words, it turns out that most of the viewing of our product on the internet is in the form of half hours and hours in the way that they used to be, which has made it easy to market. And so the rise of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu means that there are more and more markets for our writers to write the kind of work that they've done before. There's one other piece of that, and I'll get to that next, though. The ability to either write for or to have your shows, your product shown on the internet, which means that you can access them, the audience can access them at any time and often one after another, has meant that most of the old limitations on writing product have gone away. And television now that can be viewed over the internet has become increasingly like a novel with complex plots that lead from one episode to the next and deeply explored characters, all of those things that had been somewhat limited in the traditional television model where if a network, for example, didn't know that you had tuned in on week 1, they couldn't be sure you'd be tuning in on week 2. And if you hadn't tuned in until week 3, you had to make sure you didn't need to know anything that had happened on week 1 and week 2. So all of a sudden, the product that's written becomes much more complex and interesting. And as I said, also written by a range of people who had never been able to write these things before. And suddenly this is, and I think this ties into what Robert talked about in the Scandinavian model, television has become in some ways the preferred structure for dramatic storytelling. And tying into what Carl said, at least in the United States, an influx of feature writers has come into television because there in television they can do the work that they have not been able to do recently in film. So there's really remarkable stuff going on because of that. And at this point, for example, in our guild, 70+% of our writers work in television, and fewer than 30% work in features. But overall, the product is pretty strong because of the opportunities presented by the internet.
Also, I should add that the next generation of viewers, the audience that is now 10 or 12 years old, or 15 years old, or 20 years old, is, as they say, platform neutral. They don't care whether the image is on a big screen, which is what we all grew up loving, or on a small screen. For many, many young people, this is how they watch movies. Lawrence of Arabia, in there. In the American model of popular entertainment, in films, the director is the God King. In television, the writer, the creator of the show, is God King. And I think I leave it to the audience to decide where the most meaningful work for writers is, whether it's serving the vision of film directors who only want to manipulate large machines, or television writers who want to manipulate emotions and human behavior and provide insight into the human condition.